Now is Democratic Senator Chris Coons. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Coons, thank you so much for being with us. You don't get to ask the questions on July 17th, but if you did, what is the one thing you would want to know from Robert Mueller?
John, I'd want to know from Robert Mueller his view on whether or not the president obstructed justice and whether or not, in his opinion, the president could and should be prosecuted after he leaves office.
And when he says to you, I'm not going to tell you that I'm only going to go within the words that were in the Mueller report, how would you follow up?
Frankly, I'd ask him a lot of questions that led to his reviewing what's already in that report. One of the challenges here, John, is that I think Robert Mueller counted on the American people to read at least the summaries of his report. I think when you read them, it is striking. It's fairly alarming that the president and his inner circle clearly, in at least a half dozen occasions, engaged in all the elements of an obstruction of justice action. And in the first volume of his report, he lays out in great detail the searching way in which Russia interfered in our last election. The lack of concrete action here in the Congress to ensure that we've secured our next election, ways in which the majority leader has blocked bipartisan bills that would strengthen our election machinery and strengthen the ability of our intelligence community to communicate and coordinate with local elections officials, I think would be concerning and alarming. And my hope is that many more people would focus, would tune into that hearing than frankly have so far read the Mueller report.
Senator, if you will, I'd like to talk about some of the other breaking news this morning. There's this image which I think should weigh on the conscience of all of us, all Americans. It shows a father, Oscar Ramirez, and his daughter, Valeria. She's 23 months old, and they died within feet of the U.S. border, crossing the Rio Grande, trying to get to the United States to seek asylum. You know, you were a father. I've heard you talk about your kids. You're also a man of deep faith. Are we doing enough? Is Washington doing enough to protect and care for the people trying to get into this country?
No, we're not, John. And any parent who sees that image has got to be profoundly disturbed. After the Second World War, the United States reflected on the ways in which we refused to accept refugees fleeing Nazi Germany. An entire ship full of Jewish citizens of Germany who were fleeing Nazi persecution were denied the opportunity to enter the United States. They floated off the East Coast for months and months, and then ultimately were forced to return to Germany, where many were killed. It's because of that incident that we changed our laws to make it possible for people fleeing violence and persecution to come here and seek asylum. We should reflect on that history again today. There are thousands of people fleeing the violence and chaos of 3 countries in Central America. President Trump's budget and his administrative actions freezes and cuts the assistance to those 3 countries to help them stabilize, to help them combat drug trafficking. When I've met with leaders from those countries, they remind me that it is our insatiable appetite for drugs that is largely driving the violence and chaos in their countries. They welcome our assistance, and I think we should be both providing humanitarian assistance at the border for those who are fleeing that condition and seeking refuge here, and we should be working together to try and stabilize those 3 countries so that fewer parents take this desperately dangerous journey and risk their lives and their children's lives in trying to reach America.
The president of the United States right now engaged in a very tense back and forth, rhetorical back and forth with Iran. The president suggested yesterday that Iran could face obliteration, is the word he used. And then he was asked about perhaps a longer-term strategy if there is conflict. Listen to this.
Do you have an exit strategy for Iran if war does break out?
You're not going to need an exit strategy. I don't need exit strategies.
Does the United States need exit strategy, Senator?
Of course we do, John. And for anyone who knows the history of the conflict in Iraq, that is a chilling statement of either indifference or callousness to the very real risk that a war with Iran would end up being a long, expensive, and painful quagmire. We charged into Iraq to overthrow Saddam Hussein without a real plan for what would happen if several months later the Iraqi people did not rise up as one, embrace us as liberators, and then become a model democracy. And in fact, it became a long and grinding and brutal conflict And we did not have an exit strategy for that war. And it concerns me gravely that our president doesn't even think he needs an exit strategy for a war that he is flirting with, starting with Iran.
He also doesn't think he needs your approval to begin a military conflict. Does the Senate need to weigh in here?
We do. We are having a vigorous debate today about whether or not we're going to proceed to an important annual bill called the National Defense Authorization Act, and whether or not we're going to get a vote on an amendment that would require the president to seek congressional approval before starting a war with Iran. Of course, the president can act to defend American troops if attacked, but I think it's important that we get every senator on record on whether or not they're satisfied that President Trump has a clear strategy, has a compelling national interest, and has an exit strategy for a potential conflict with Iran.
First Democratic presidential debates start tonight. You're sort of patient zero when it comes to support for Joe Biden, one of his original and strongest supporters. What do you think that the former vice president needs to get out of these debates?
Well, that's the good thing for him, John. He doesn't need to introduce himself to the American people. The American people know Joe's heart. They know his record. They know his leadership abilities, and they know that he would move our country forward in a positive way. There are many candidates across these two nights who still need to introduce themselves to the American people. It is a wonderfully vibrant and diverse pool of 20 candidates who will be debating over two nights. My hope is that they will focus on our overall goal. Every minute that they spend attacking each other, tearing each other down, seeming to be a better bully than Donald Trump is a good minute for Donald Trump's reelection. And every minute that a Democrat stands on that debate stage in Miami and lays out a clear and hopeful and positive future for the American people and explains why the American people should trust a Democrat to be the next president is a good minute for those of us who hope Donald Trump is a one-term president.
Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, John.
Allison?
All right, John, she is